Good afternoon, everyone. I'm responsible for the Inquiring Minds monthly series under the auspices of Toronto Mensa, and I warmly welcome you to this Zoom edition of Inquiring Minds. My name is Kathleen Smith. It is my pleasure to introduce today's three speakers, Dr. Ketan Kulkarni, Christopher Morris, and Dr. Francis Yu. Dr. Ketan Kulkarni is joining us from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. He is a physician specializing in the treatment of blood disorders and cancer in children. He conducts research and has published more than 300 original research articles in professional journals to improve the care of oncology patients. He is also an entrepreneur and has received more than 50 research awards and grants. As a certified coach, Ketan volunteers and provides pro bono coaching at national and international levels in Canada, India, the United States, and other countries. His coaching practice is focused on deep inner work to achieve excellence, authentic success, financial mastery, and fulfillment. Ketan is engaged in humanitarian work through an organization called Mission VJ, V-I-J-A-Y. As well, he's an entrepreneur and has launched several startups and businesses, including affordable housing initiatives. Christopher Morris is joining us today from the United Kingdom, from England. He has worked on more than 50 books as an author, ghostwriter, or editor across an array of subjects, including several bestsellers. His journalistic writing has been featured in the New York Times, the Sunday Telegraph, the Financial Times, Newsweek, Yahoo, the Times Educational Supplement, and Seeking Alpha. When he's not reading or writing, Christopher enjoys sports, music, traveling, dining in restaurants, and walking his dog in the countryside. Regarding the book Soar, A Soul's Quest, Christopher is a co-author, not a ghostwriter. Dr. Francis Yu is a physician and practicing osteopath at his private osteopathic medical practice called Whole Presence Osteopathy in New York City, where he is located now. He is also an electric guitarist, a sushi enthusiast, video gamer, scholar, and educator. He's a cultivation coach who draws upon a variety of experiences as a certified Myers-Briggs type indicator practitioner, Riso Hudson certified Enneagram teacher, and faculty member for the Kundalini awakening process as practiced by Glenn Morris, to help himself and others cultivate wholeness, presence, and palpable personal development. Our speakers have written two books. The Legendary Quest, written by Dr. Ketan Kulkarni and Dr. Francis Yu, published in 2022. And Soar, Christopher, perhaps you could hold that. There it is.
Can we see this?
Soar, Quest, which was published in 2024, published by Dr. Ketan Kulkarni, Christopher Morris, and Dr. Francis Yu. The Legendary Quest is an account of the personal journey that one can embark on to live an authentic life. And as an aside, I can vouch for the fact that this is not your typical self-help book. It's a really genuine book that's quite meaty. Whereas Soar is a fable about an eagle who embarks on this journey. My own experience, having read some of Soar, is that the descriptions in it are very, very lush and poetic. It's also a fascinating story. Today, our three presenters are going to engage in a discussion with each other about living authentically according to your own real sense of what matters to you, rather than being driven by the expectations of others. This involves a journey of getting to know yourself. And our speakers will be addressing how you can start on that journey and what tools you can utilize along the way. They will be speaking from life experience, both their own and from their experiences at coaching other people. Just to give you a really quick sneak peek at the presentation, I had a look at some of the materials. And this question was one that popped out at me. Why do only some people succeed despite so many others doing hard and smart work? So, welcome, Ketan, Christopher, and Francis.
Hello. Thank you so much, Kathleen. That's a very kind introduction for me.
Yeah,
Francis, Chris.
I'd echo that as it's very humbling, I guess. But it's so very kind of you to introduce. We really appreciate it.
Yes, I'm really glad to be here, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for everyone that's turned up, for taking time out of your days. I'm sure there's other things you could be doing, so we're very appreciative as well.
Yeah, particularly on a Sunday, so really appreciated all the presence. So now, hopefully everybody can see the slides. Can you see the slide, Kathleen?
I can see, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So
Yeah.
I cannot see the question and answer, so I'm hoping that we have a great discussion. And so if there's any questions along the way, please jump in. This is not meant to be a race to the last slide, so I'm quite happy if we never make it to the last slide. And we'll engage in a conversation and sort of go with the flow and see how it cooks, you know. So with that, the first slide is basically me. So thank you, Kathleen, for the introduction there. And, you know, today I'm engaged in a lot of different things and interests and passions, and seems like there's a lot to do. And a lot of people ask, like, oh, how do you possibly do it? You know? And my answer is, well, you can do more, you know, and that doesn't come from working 24/7. I think it's about recognizing your authenticity. And, you know, very briefly, I went through long university training for about 14 years and then started as a clinician researcher and, you know, achieved everything that one is expected to achieve, had a growing family. And at the end of that, you know, within 5 years, had my academic promotion and found myself burnt out. You know, I said, well, this is not working, you know, it doesn't feel right. And that really, you know, instead of just battling that, I sought help, and I was able to embark on longitudinal leadership training and really sort of ask the hard questions. And then, you know, through the next several years of receiving coaching and then becoming a certified coach myself and discovering these powerful tools, re-exploring my interests in ancient wisdom and, you know, art and science and mathematics and medicine and sort of holistic care, and meeting these two amazing people, I was able to go through a major identity shift that told me that, you know, basically I had parked a lot of my interests and who I was on the back burner and pursuing this chase, which looked like a hamster wheel, like with no particular end in sight. And that transformative journey is part of what's going to be discussed today. And certainly there's a lot more to do. And, you know, I look forward to future steps, but just to introduce to our audience where I come from and sort of take it from there. So maybe I'll pass on to Francis next.
So I'm always in this space between speaking too much from the head and connecting or speaking more also from my body and my heart, using some of the Enneagram parlance. Something I speak with Ketan a lot about is there is this gravitation to this topic, and whether or not we see it, we can at least acknowledge that something is happening. And of course, I can't assume why you are here, but I'd say there's some sort of pull to be with us at least, and something about pulling these ideas, which whether you have read the book already or not, and making it a reality. And that is something I personally say those who are quite intellectually gifted, or maybe I'm speaking for myself. I'll speak for myself, and if this applies to you, then you can agree with me, is that I can have 10 ideas and entertain them, and yet ultimately none of them come to fruition. And my hope is that at the minimum, we can share that the developing the ideas to reality into your life, or at the same time, or at the very least, for those who are speaking here, that we are doing that in our lives, could be an example of something worth to you, hopefully. So that is the hope, and I'm sure we will circle around to our stories as well. But I would say a lot of my story is similar to Ketan's. And the one thing before I hand it off would say, I'm here to continually, not that it's easy, dive into the unknown and unexplored in my life, not just mentally, but also into the actual, so we walk the walk, as we use a very simple idiom. And it's scary, but I know that when I'm doing that, then something new is happening. And with that, I'll hand it off.
Thank you, Francis. Chris, do you want to give a little intro?
Yes. So obviously I'm a writer and author, and I guess my day-to-day life is quite significantly different from Francis and Ketan. I think that with regard to what Ketan was saying, my path to leading an authentic life and a happy life was quite different, in that I really hadn't established my purpose during my early life, or what I believed my purpose to be. I recognize, and I would say I was the opposite. I could see people around me working hard or whatever it may be, and I could see fundamentally they're not happy, so why are they still doing it? And I knew that wasn't, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've worked extremely hard with a lot of dedication to become an established writer. I mean, it's not easy. But I knew that there was such a thing as burnout, and I knew there was such a thing as dedicating yourself too much to a vocation. I guess my journey was more, for the early part of my life, I was very lost, to be perfectly honest. I'm going to talk about this more later on, but I needed to identify that authentic purpose for myself. And that was a real struggle. And I think it was a real struggle due to circumstances that occurred in my own life that's specific to me, but also due to more general societal and external factors that unquestionably will impact everyone that's listening to this and that ever will listen to this. So that definitely informed this book for me, because my journey was challenging. You know, I mean, it was really difficult for me to find the right path, and there were personal circumstances that made it even more difficult. But what I will say is that now I've found my calling, as it were, and now I have a good kind of balance in my life, and I have the lifestyle that I wanted, really. You know, it's so much, you know, like I say, is it's worth it. You know, it's worth really pursuing this, because I'm just so much happier than I was. You know, it's hard to truly convey the difference it makes to you psychologically, emotionally, I'd say physically, and in terms of health. Really, every facet of your life becomes impacted by this. And if you're not on the right path, you could be a super successful person, but if you're not on the right path for you, then I don't think you can ever be truly fulfilled, and I don't think ultimately you'll have a happy life. And you might have all the plaudits and all the kind of financial rewards in the world, but if it's not aligned to who you are, then ultimately it won't be a successful life.
Thank you, Chris. That's awesome. So maybe we'll embark into our discussion. And you know, we often like to start with a few real life examples. And you know, I kind of went through our stash of examples, and most of these are real life examples. So hopefully they will relate to majority of the people attending the webinar. You know, so maybe I'll start reading the first, and maybe Francis, you can do the second, and Chris, you can do the third. There's 3 examples we picked. So we've got a 36-year-old pharmaceutical accountant, very, very successful young professional, you know, working 50-odd hours per week. They often have to do the weekends because of tax issues and paperwork, making a very high income, you know, doing really, really well in a high-cost living city in Canada. Most of the cities now are becoming high-cost living. Has a family with 2 kids and $200K in student loans. But there's a cost, you know. I mean, none of this, you know, seeming success in the societal world comes without the investment of time, you know. So there's very little time now left for family, hobbies, and friends. And, you know, such is the nature of the housing game in Canada that he had to purchase $1 million home, you know, now probably that has become 1.5 million, plus a house, and, you know, plus the interiors, and plus a car for 2 people. And really, you know, he or she, you know, this could be either person, you know, feels the burn, feels stressed out, and, you know, really unsure where this is all going and how long it can be sustained. You know, life has just begun after so much hard work and so much commitment, and feels like it's already ending at the same time. You know, this is a very common story I hear, and hopefully a lot of people would agree with it. So we'll park this example for a little bit and maybe go to let people mull over this and go to the next one. Francis?
Okay, so in this example, we have a 58-year-old corporate lawyer working somewhat similarly, 26 hours per week and 8 weekends a year for the last 3 years after health issues. So fewer hours, but then there was a shift in that, the hours worked. So making multiple 6 figures per year, divorced twice, now in a plausible new relationship, children grown up and they're no longer in the household, and net worth $2.5 million, loves weekend parties, misses the quote unquote good old times. And this is I would say a running theme in I would say in my life, in our lives, and these examples, feels something is missing, something, and can't find purpose and joy, which is going to be a motif and theme for our discussion.
Yeah, again, very real life example. You know, we've all met many, many people like this, you know, enviable financial status, but, you know, missing the purpose and joy. Well, let's go to another example, which also commonly comes across, you know, particularly with our students. Chris, do you want to do this one?
Yeah, sure. So this would be an example of a 25-year-old medical student. I've encountered a friend who's been a medical student recently, and I know it completely consumed his life. I actually spoke, without going into the example, I'll just explain briefly that I told Ketan about this person. I'd been coaching him to play chess. So he'd actually improved really well for 18 months and become a really good player. And then he's just recently qualified to be a doctor. And he said to me, well, that's it, he'll never play chess ever again. And he hasn't actually. Completely correct. Anyway, this medical student.
Sorry, I think I should interrupt here. I think everybody should know that you're a 2,500 chess player. That's like a national grandmaster at the very least.
Well, I'm close to that level, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the writing, right? You can see the world in so many different ways, like a chess.
I mean, I'm better at writing than chess, I must say, but I can play chess reasonably well. Yeah, so this person will be working 40 to 50 hours per week. You have to be extremely dedicated, pretty much non-negotiable. I'm sure these two will tell you. Obviously gifted academically, straight A plus an honest student. And it's the typical thing again, probably quite a well-balanced person with many hobbies, but in fact, life is now consuming him, barely able to stay afloat. I'd say it's a financial challenge as well, studying for medicine for most people. This person now becoming aware of the long training years to become a subspecialist and worries that if it's going to be possible for her to live in the city of her choice. In the example of my friend, he just moved, you just have to move where you can get work. So that can be very troubling. I'm not sure what it's like in Canada, but in Britain, the environment that you could be thrust into can vary massively. Everyone thinks Britain is, everyone speaks like Hugh Grant, and everywhere looks like Notting Hill or the countryside, but it doesn't. I can assure you. So, you also accrue debts through student loans, and if you're not financially educated, this can be a massive problem. What's for this person? And naturally, all these issues add up, and they just find themselves wondering what to do, where to go, where to start. And in fact, I would assume if they've even made the right decision to go down this route in the first place. And this all really adds up to stress and anxiety. And it's not really an ideal beginning when you're going into what is a very challenging profession as well. And then you don't start out with a massive salary as a doctor. Certainly not in Britain, you don't. It's actually quite an insulting salary you start out with. Hence why there've been extensive strikes recently in Britain for junior doctors in particular. So yeah, so I mean, this is an example that obviously these two will be very familiar with. I'm somewhat familiar with it. I guess as a ghostwriter, I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurial people who've done very long hours, and I've seen these stressed situations. And I think it's something that I wanted to talk about generally is I think the media pushes this narrative that you have to work and work and work, and if you don't do that, you're somehow in the wrong morally or ethically. You see these people like Elon Musk saying, I worked 100 hours per week when I was setting up Tesla, and you should sleep on the floor of the office, and should you do that? If so, why? Why should you do that? It doesn't strike me as something that you should do on any level, or certainly not for a sustained period of time. So I have seen that quite a bit in my work. So I think typically there is this cultural message that is communicated to people that you will find fulfillment from work. There's a story about this now. It's in the media all the time. There's a story about this now in Britain where the Prime Minister is saying, oh, we need to cut down on the number of people who are sick and off work because work is how you get your meaning from life and all this. And I do think you can derive a great deal of meaning from your work, and I definitely do. But this grinding culture of working every hour that God sends and literally sacrificing everything else and just thinking, well, if I climb the next rung up the ladder, if I get the next bauble, then it'll make me happy. So for so many people, it just simply doesn't work, and they end up burnt out, they end up unhappy, they end up stressed. And maybe you two would like to talk a little bit more about that and your experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, and really, this was just 3, honestly, randomly handpicked examples. We just wanted to get to each age group. There's many more, so many examples from particularly all walks of life, and in no way this is only relevant to medicine. I mean, we know healthcare in Canada is in crisis for sure, but this is in no way limited to medical examples. This is just what we've seen in all walks of life. And 3 were picked to just highlight commonly recognized profiles. So what, and why is this relevant to the Mensons? And I think this is why, I mean, Mensons are among the most driven and gifted people, high achieving people on the planet. And I know somehow it skipped the slide. And it's the top 2% of the world's IQ. It's not nothing. It's IQ of 130 or more. They're very keen. I know at least many dozens of Mensons who are good acquaintances of friends or family, and they're very keen to explore and excel and learn and co-create and ultimately have the very best of human experience. I think personally, I think the last statement is not an exaggeration, that, experiencing high level of success and fulfillment is at the core of any Menson's life goal, and hopefully this is why a lot of people are joining us today for a lot of shared discussion here. So with that, and this is, it was interesting, several years ago, I was asked to write this paper for a major journal. And when I read the data, this was when I was in the middle of the storm and figuring out, how to deal with all the stuff I was dealing with. Now, hard to believe 6-7 years earlier. This is what I found, there's rampant evidence of job dissatisfaction and burnout and unhappiness, and in particular in the medical field, right? I mean, very clear data that regardless of the specialty, 50% or more of the docs are burnt out. So if you're going to see a doctor, 50% or more chances that they are not happy or they don't enjoy what they're doing. Well, that's not good news. You'd rather want people who are interested in what they're doing, and like Chris was saying, constant pressure to achieve more with a very fast-paced lifestyle that we experience at least in the big cities, with unclear and changing measures and standards for success. If you can believe it, Facebook actually has a group that's called the Trillionaire Club. It kind of tells you how to be a trillionaire, which is making over $100 billion in wealth in their life. It couldn't believe it, right? I mean, who realistically needs $100 billion to be successful? It's a good question to ask. And how many people will achieve that, right? And there's the if-then hypothesis, which we so talk about, right? And we know now that, there's so many YouTube millionaires and, there's real estate agents rapidly ramping up career ladders. Like, there's so much we see, like, medicine used to be, a first career. Now I'm seeing it as a second, third career. I'm seeing people from medicine all the time leaving to other second or third careers. Like, all the traditional paths that you started on the same desk and kind of worked your way up are becoming obsolete, right? I mean, we have so many colleagues who have retired from one position, become financially independent, now doing PhDs. It's just unbelievable how much things are changing and getting mishmashed. And, and despite this is what I found, this is all evidence-based, and a search really showed that a lot of people lack clarity despite sort of a lot of hard and smart work we were talking about. Not sure, Chris or Francis, you want to comment on this piece before we move forward?
Yeah, well, I think with regard to, you just mentioned the trillionaire thing. A couple of things came to mind, really. I know Sam Bankman-Fried, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. If people don't know who he is, he went to prison for 25 years recently because of FTX collapsing due to some very stupid decisions he made.
Yeah.
He was mooted to be potentially the world's first trillionaire, I believe. Like, I think that was his goal, or it was said he could achieve that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. And then the other thing that came to mind was in the film Wall Street, with Michael Douglas and Charlie Sheen, I think, is in it as well, from the 80s. The character, he's like a young Wall Street trader who meets this guy Gordon Gekko, who's the very driven, big wig on Wall Street. And at first he's enchanted by him and gets taken under his wing and all the rest of it. Then eventually, every time he comes to question, God, this guy has just had no ethics whatsoever. He will just trample over anyone. And at some point, he just poses him the question of how much is enough. You know, how much is enough? At what point have you got enough? And I think that's really intrinsically tied into this whole subject matter, because at some point you should feel a sense, if you're going to have a successful life and if you're going to have a happy life, you should feel a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment that is not about your next goal on the horizon. So at some point you're going to reach this point and it's going to be a nirvana, and then after that you're going to be happy. Because if you're it's good to be goal oriented. I'm a very goal oriented person, but if you're constantly seeking that thing on the horizon all the time, that next achievement, that next plaudit, that next published paper, or whatever it might be, when you actually achieve it, when you reach this supposed point on the horizon, you just reset and start all over again and then end up chasing something else.
Next goalpost.
You're chasing your tail, essentially.
Yeah.
And I see this with so many people in the public eye. I'm trying not to name too many names. I've named one already. There's many others that I think are quite obvious. They just have almost lost the ability to be happy because they have sunk so deeply into this goal-oriented mindset of, now I'm going to chase the next achievement. Now I'm going to chase the next goal. And they can never enjoy what they've already got, which in some cases is astronomical wealth and very, very large achievements. But yet they just cannot enjoy that because they're just addicted. It's like it's a compulsion to chase the next thing. And I think so much pressure can come on you from external sources, whether it's within your career, within your employer, within the media and what's generally presented to people, that makes people think that this is the way to be. I mean, if you go on YouTube now, there's so much material about how to be successful, how to achieve this, how to achieve that. And some of it's really good and useful, but it never asks the question of what is success, what represents success. And this kind of leads on to the next bit.
Yeah, exactly. Just to keep us on time, Francis, do you want to talk about this? I know that you like to talk quite about the core problem and framework.
Yes. I like to share also personally. I think that will help dovetail into this. So my parents are immigrants from South Korea, but I was born in New York, in New York City. And it took me 35 or maybe a little bit more years to realize that the things I was doing weren't necessarily something that it would have made me happy because it made someone else happy. As a more personal way of saying it, my parents want me to be happy, but if I do everything they want me to do to make them happy, I will be unhappy, and thus they will be unhappy. If I do things that will make me happy, but it will make them unhappy, but by me being happy, they will ultimately, hopefully, love on me and then be happy. And there's this sense of not to make it seem as if it's a egoic self-centeredness, but where was this sense of teach me to be me, as opposed to teaching me to be the version of me that everyone else wants, and everyone has their idea of what they want me to be. And the ones that were the most successful, I would say, were the ones that said no. And the reasons we have smartphones, airplanes, any other invention that future generation will take for granted and make the new paradigm. And part of that, maybe not the best word is drive, but that shock it would be, is this not just having an external goal. I will have a net worth of XYZ. Not that that's unimportant, but I will wake up every morning feeling utterly refreshed and happy about my circumstance, or I will be able to face conflicts without withdrawing or festering anger in my heart. And these, lack of better term, subjective internal objectives, where, now going to the core problem here, right? Those are all things that are not the part of the script, as it were, because everyone's is different, right? And thus need of this framework, way of navigating the definition, vision, and plan, and ultimately having others to see what we're doing, because it is quite difficult to escape our own view of ourselves, and that's a whole different discussion. And that's what a lot of what we are exploring is based on, this core problem.
Yeah, I think that was a great way to describe it. And this is what happened. I think.
Can I just mention something briefly?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Just on the previous slide.
Oh, the previous slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think it's very important to emphasize the tribe aspect of it, because I think we really have become detached from this, that was historically an important part of human society, that we were in communities. Politicians still use the word community, but I think to a great extent, we've become detached from this aspect of our nature. And I really, in the book, that is a kind of an aspect, in SOAR, I should say, that is an aspect that I've really tried to emphasize, because I do think it's something, obviously it's an allegory because it's an animal society, and I do think that's something that animals, of course, continue, that's part of their nature, and they still follow their nature. We think we're so sophisticated now because we've got technology and all these things, but yeah, I feel we're really detached from our actual nature in many ways, and this is one of the many ways in which we are detached. It's an increasingly atomized society where it's all about the individual, and yes, it's important that the individual can pursue their individual goals, but I do believe, as is suggested here, that we need this kind of tribal support as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, and we'll come full circle to that in a few slides, and this is what really happened, I mean, in 2019, when we all first met, we figured we are on the same quest, and we asked some core questions through our deliberations and innumerable meetings that happened subsequently, is that, how is it that some people achieve phenomenal success, and not just in metric terms, they also have the feeling aspect of success, which means that they're incredibly happy and satisfied. We all know those people, right? Very palpable presence. They experience the very best of human existence, but this is rare. Why is it so observable yet rare? And some people seem to have it all. And is it the luck or the hard work or smart work or what? And and we really wanted to know what is something that underpins all of this apparent success. And that led to a lot of different deliberations. And, before we go further, on the contrary, we talked a lot about this, and I'm not going to read every line, but a lot of us, in even in the developed world, seem to struggle. We seem to struggle trying to keep things under control and, not getting to our potential. Like Francis said, have ideation, but not really get to the endpoints, not able to really give full attention to our relationships, our family, our friends, and really experience the money we have made in a good way, and so many different things, right? Like we're in this cloud of uncertainty and unhappiness, and what we called visceral discontent, so something just doesn't sit and feel right. And those were the deliberations that came. So, Chris, do you want to talk about this?
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, this is why, we started on this journey of first doing the legendary quest. I mean, there's too many self-help books. but there's too much rara, right? I mean, somebody picks up, oh, subconscious, the power of subconscious, unleash it and you become the next millionaire. You know, somebody will say,
I mean, I think I just mentioned this. There's
yeah,
it's insane actually. And now there's a lot of books as well as YouTube content and video content. And you know, I would say, I don't know if others would agree with this, but I see it's the same theme all the time. It's always say, how do you get to be really successful? How do you get to be really rich? How, you know, it's never anything that would be calibrated to your well-being or calibrated to your particular circumstances. And I think that's what's really lacking. And that was, you know, that's kind of our message, or it's a central tenet of our message in both of these books, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you know, the Legendary Quest was highlighted in, I believe this was 2022. It's impossible to believe that. That, you know, we tried to give this central tenet of the message, you know, and some of the lines I borrowed from this article that, you know, why does everybody need to bother with it? You know, it's because I think everybody deserves to have you know, a fulfilling, meaningful, happy life. And I think that's not an exaggeration, right? I mean, it should be accessible and available for everybody. But then, you know, when we presented the book and, you know, it was well received and, you know, the content was there. And, you know, one day a friend called up and said, you know, Francis, remember this story, you know, and Chris would too, that they said, yeah, you know, this is all great, but, you know, there's a lot of meat and bone and this and that. And can you tell me a story? And me being just like all of the humans, I said, you're just being lazy. I don't want to deal with this. You just need to have to read the book and digest the stuff. And then, you know, a few days later, you know, the idea stuck. I said, yeah, you know, that makes sense. You know, maybe not everybody's an abstract reader and the content heavy stuff might be difficult for people to sort of digest. And then, you know, Soar was born. That's what happened. You know, we said, okay, you know, we need to do a fable. We need to do a story that's everybody's story. That will resonate with every person under the sun and identify issues global in nature. Francis and Chris, comments?
Yeah, I think that a work of fiction can resonate with people in a way that non-fiction doesn't. I would say that Orwell's Animal Farm was a big influence on this book, just because it's quite a masterful anthropomorphic animal story. But I also think, for example, to pick another Orwell book, if you look at Orwell's 1984, that gives you a brilliant, inspirational insight into what it's like to live in a totalitarian society. Now, you could write a textbook about what it's like to live in a totalitarian society, and it would arguably be more informative, but it wouldn't. You feel it after you've read 1984. You feel what it's like. You know what. At the end, I would never forget the end of that, where there's the two central characters, and there's Winston and Julia, and you realize they don't love each other anymore. They've been crushed by this. It is crushing. And I think you couldn't. That's why we think to have a literary work and to have this fable that we tried to get as many poetic descriptions as you kindly described at the start, Kathleen. Just because it's inspirational, and it illustrates all these themes without, hopefully in a way that is more gentle, I think, and less hectoring and less lecturing, you know. So it's certainly intended to be a very relatable book, and one with a strong narrative, and one where you can enjoy the writing on its own level and for its own merit, but also with all these themes and other themes as well, kind of woven into it.
Yeah, I also want to share that in a way, it is also simply what the three of us wanted to do. It is something that there was something that compelled us to do this as part of our legendary quest. It was something that felt valuable to our own lives, and thus it came into reality. It was born. I spoke with Ketan sometimes about rereading the book itself, even though we're the ones that, the three of us made it a reality. Then I'm reading it again and I say, I'm glad we did this, because it is yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that part. It was also part of what we felt compelled to do and called to do as part of our quest.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I mean, just this morning, a friend of mine called from Nepal and said, well, this is my story. Like, it just fits perfectly with who I am and my challenges and struggles. And it's just so gratifying to hear from different parts of the world that it transcends the geopolitical, whatever other biological characteristics. It's about essentially being human and following our own hero's journey, the story centers around, if anybody has read The Alchemist or Jonathan Siegel, it's that fiction inspirational genre that, we wanted to bring this work that would hopefully add to the literary flair and literary flavor, and really explore the adventure that becomes an epic journey of transformation and change and betterment, which we also call life. And in keeping with the Canadian reconciliation and very topical, important piece, it does draw on Indigenous wisdom, right? I mean, all of us are students of ancient wisdom and drawing from those philosophies, and they're so similar all over the world. If you read any of the scholarly textbooks or the scholarly translation or translations of major religious works across the world, the underpinnings are so similar. And ultimately, we wanted a tale of self-awareness that involved an often trying but ultimately a rewarding journey, which also examines personal and spiritual growth and identity and childhood development, like all of those different themes that one of the local Indigenous elders and leaders said when he said, yeah, this work will go as deep as the person will go. So we wanted that, right? I mean, that was one of the best feedbacks we got, that, yes, you will connect with the work as deep or as far as high as you would like to go. And, that's been rewarding part of it, and very important to us, that, we can create meaningful change and impact, and it really stemmed from the idea of believing that we truly believe that everybody has a soul in them, and that it reflects a story of a philosophy of life transcending all parameters and regular definitions that seem to divide us as humans, and reflect on the authentic self and the authenticity of us as human race. So just because of our time, I'd like to go to themes and maybe hand over to Chris and Francis a little bit to talk about this.
Yeah, I'll let Francis speak first, because I'll probably end up speaking for a really long time.
Francis, go ahead.
Yeah, as you can see, we are highlighting these 5 themes, and ultimately, I would like for us to emphasize, and even for us as the presenters, that are these themes in our lives? I mean, in general, yes, they are, but can we point out particular instances in which these things happened, or are happening, or we hoped them to happen? For myself, cultivating self-awareness, I have all these tools for cultivating self-awareness. I happen to, like a better term, binge learn all these psychological perspectives and such. But for me, that turned into becoming an expert on these themes, as opposed to going into the depths of what that may be. So I'm just sharing that that these are themes that are human, very human, and just offering it as a reflective for insight for all of us, whether when or is there not enough of these things, or we think we have these things, but would someone else call us out and say, not really? So that's where the importance of the community comes in.
Yeah, and I know, Chris, you wanted to really talk about this piece.
So I'll try not to go on about this for too long, but I think this is really important to discuss because they're kind of central themes to the book, and also I think it's particularly pertinent for Mensa members for an organisation such as Mensa. So we've discussed the importance of self-awareness as a theme in this book and generally, and we all collectively believe that this self-awareness should be derived from self-knowledge, and we're advocates for achieving this through a variety of different means. The reason that it's important, particularly important, is because success means different things to different people, as does fulfillment and happiness. And yet we're sold what is quite, I would say, uniform notion of success, particularly by the media, and it's pretty relentlessly driven home. I mean, I would say we're basically bombarded with images of what constitutes success and how we should define our own success. Whereas in reality, you as an individual might not be suited to this typically quite materialistic notion of success. It might not be fulfilling or enjoyable for you to climb that particular mountain. But you won't know this unless you know yourself. So I think it's critically important to develop self-knowledge so that this can then inform your path through life and your journey to success and fulfillment. And this is ultimately what we see Saw do in the story. It's one of the primary themes, the journey of self-knowledge, where actually you discover that some of the things you believed about yourself and some of the things you presumed about yourself are not actually true. And I think always the important thing when you look at any life or lifestyle, it's to actually understand what that entails, not the image that you have of it or that is presented to you. For example, you might like the idea of being a writer, but you need to be familiar with the reality of what the life of a writer is actually like. I spend a lot of time on my own with my dog, and I'm not a social person because you can't be, really. You have to sit and read. You've got to be reading extensively, and you spend a lot of time writing, and you are on your own. Or you might look at the life of a doctor enviously as well, but again, you should acquaint yourself with the workload involved and everything that's part of that process. And I think all of these things are critically important when we think about success. It has to be success on our own terms, otherwise it's meaningless. And I think that this can be very challenging for people who are part of an organisation such as Mensa. I hope that many people listening to this or watching this are happy with their lives and where they are in life. But from a personal perspective, as I mentioned earlier, it was quite a struggle for me to find the right path. Without boring with too many details, when I was a child, it was discovered that I had an exceptionally high IQ, which is a very strange experience because you're still just an ordinary child with normal interests, but then you're also told that you're particularly intelligent, whatever is meant by that. And it's a very confusing experience. And it was a great gift in life, undoubtedly, because I always had faith in myself because of that, but it also brings its share of challenges and problems. And I'm sure people listening to this will have experienced these challenges and problems. Like, firstly, no one knows what to do with you in the system because the system isn't designed for someone like you. It's designed for people with respect, average levels of ability. So I would be unbelievably surprised if there aren't people listening to this who've experienced frustrations and difficulties with that. And then secondly, certainly I did, and I would say generally, you come under pressure, some of which I think is self-induced, because you think, well, I should be doing something with this. I should be doing something out of the ordinary, otherwise, why have I been given this ability? Now, I had massive problems with this in my adolescence and early adult life, partly due to the third point that I'm coming to in a second, which absolutely mirrors what happened to Francis, actually. But generally speaking, I felt completely lost, directionless, and unhappy for many years. And this was largely because I didn't know what to do in my life. I couldn't find my place in the world. And I could feel the time that I had to fulfill my potential just seeping away like sand in an egg timer. And I had no one to turn to. There was no one who could help me or understand. And I don't mean for this to sound disrespectful, but if I'd followed the advice of my family in particular, I would never have been happy. I literally would have been unhappy for the rest of my life. Thankfully, I found something that suited me. I invested myself in it wholeheartedly, and now I'm on a life path that has led to fulfillment, and I'm extremely grateful for that, because my early life was not happy at all. But I think this is an innate problem for lots of people, particularly those with cognitive gifts, that are feeling that there's something more to life, feeling they should be doing more, but not knowing what to do or where to turn. And that's another major theme of Soar, which can really be said to be an allegory of this life experience. It's very much a journey of discovery and of resolving all these internal issues, your own past, all of the things that make you what you are, and trying to come out the other end with a viable direction and life plan that will ultimately be fulfilling on your terms. And I think that's why quite a few people have told me that Soar is a very relatable book and story, which, of course, we intended it to be. So I think it's really important. I really want to emphasize that, because I think these are issues that Menson's in particular will have encountered, and we try to address that in the book. And well, we've been fortunate to have blanket positive feedback, so I believe it's been successful. But it's certainly, for me, something that informed me during the process, because, yeah, I mean, it's not my story. It's not the story of me, but what happened to me definitely, naturally you draw on your own experiences. So it's definitely in there somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, all of us have had this question, so many people ask me, is it your story, and truly, it draws on all of our life experiences. So I think we're almost out of time. So we just wanted to emphasize that, it's also about emphasizing as we call, good old family values, right? So, this was very inspiring also, because my daughter actually did all these images, and they're included in the book, and that's her here. At the time she was in grade 3, that was last year when she did it. And I think what my friends described as a parenting mic drop moment is really that we felt that the work Soar and the values and the ideas are, of course, very important for adults, but also very important for young children. And we're on this journey now, and we really wanted to inspire the younger sort of age group. So now my daughter was able to, after narrating Soar to her, rewrite that as a children's book, and it will be published very soon by the same publishers. So I think it's very, very exciting time point when we are really trying to look for purposeful and meaningful impact. And maybe we'll stop on those themes. Not sure if anybody has closing remarks, but otherwise we'll just take questions now. And thank you so much for listening. I see that nobody's left the webinar, so that's a testament. And thank you.
Yeah, no, I don't have too much to add. Yeah, we're more than happy to take questions.
So thank you to the three of you. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah,
perfect.
Suddenly my voice seems to have lost. Okay. Thank you very much, Ketan, Chris, and Francis. This is really quite intriguing, some of the points that you have raised, and I'm learning a lot just from hearing this freshly. One point that I would like to make myself before we go into the questions that have been posted is that, in my experience, when I'm trying to understand myself, I'll come to a plateau and I'll think, okay, now I really understand myself. But I find that in relationship with other people, if they're also being authentic or whatever, that I learned so much more about me, that it comes up in relationships just naturally, not deliberately, but just naturally. So that might be part of it, is part of what you're saying about the tribe. But me in particular, I'm talking about interacting with people.
Yeah, I think other people always see you in a way that you can never see yourself, and they can give you insight that you would never get just from your own personal experience. I think.
Okay, so now I will look at some of the questions in the box. Elka and Ola made a comment while you were in process saying that success and fulfillment need definition. Can you say a bit more to that point?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question, and thank you for asking that. And that was really part of the study, the research, the deliberation, introspection, and all of those great words, when we did the legend request, and we tried to define it as best as possible in a comprehensive way. So the success chapter in that book really dives deep into the available data, and it's very clear that it's not about one goal or one achievement, and it's really about this longitudinal matrix that's very wide and rich colored pattern, or a tapestry that's your own. And we define that, and people who consider themselves successful typically do so over long periods of time, and it builds on this network. There's a beautiful Harvard research paper on this, and that's probably one of the most pioneering works on success, as is the longitudinal study on happiness. That success is a rich network of your achievements, but also your joy in various aspects of life. Not to forget legacy, which is how you're helping others to do what you're doing, and really influencing the world beyond yourself, and significance, as in casting a longer term, wider impact on the world. So yeah, I 100% agreed. And that's probably where the crux of the problem is, that most of us, like, I was never asked in my 15 plus years of training and work, what do you feel successful? Like, 0 times. I mean, none of us are typically asked to manage your emotions. Yeah, men can't cry, no way, or not a chance, you're cribbing, or blah, whatever myths there are. Oh, X, Y, and Z cannot be a great leader. Whatever the myths, societal myths, and this are, like, or Chris was saying, you have to cram in 100 hours in your first 10 years. It comes so many times. And so, yeah, I agree, just let others comment too.
Yeah, I'd like to just talk a little bit about fulfillment. So, I mean, just to put it on a very simple, practical level, my view on this would be fulfillment is living a day that you want to live as often as possible.
Yeah.
So if you cut it down to the simplest level possible, if you just spend as much time as possible doing things that you want to do, and as little time as possible doing things that you don't want to do, by definition, you'll be fulfilled. So that's why I specifically mentioned the life of a writer. The life of a writer is writing, so you have to want to be on your own in the study, reading and writing a lot. It's nice when we get to, I mean, I've never done anything like a webinar before. It's really nice to do this and be complimented and have people take an interest in what you've done. But that's 1.5 hours out of tens of thousands of hours of practice. And, I believe you have to generate this self-knowledge that we discussed. And then once you have the self-knowledge, that can very much inform what would be fulfilling for you. And then from that point, you can start to make decisions about what you want your average day to look like. And what could be very attractive to another person may be anathema to you, I would say. And then the other thing I just wanted to add briefly about fulfillment is, I think and I think this applies to everything we've discussed, it's always an ongoing journey. It's never in stasis. You never reach the point and then stop. You're always trying to develop. So for example, just to give you a little example from my own life, I started cooking a lot recently, which I never expected to sit on a podcast webinar and say, because I had no cooking skills whatsoever. But I've just been bitten by the bug of doing it recently. And I think it was honestly partly staying at Ketan's house and seeing his wife cook every night was part of the reason. But I just love food, so I just tried something, it went okay, and I thought, okay, I'll try something else, and then that went okay, and now I love doing it. And that's I'm never going to be the world's greatest chef. I'm never going to make any money out of this, but I find it very fulfilling. So I think you should always be on a journey of trying to enrich your life and trying to develop new skills and find new things, new outlets.
And Francis, did you want to kick in with anything there?
Well, this phrase came to mind, and it's very unpolished, but I was thinking about this. If I can look forward to doing something, and as I'm doing it, I'm fully immersed, and looking back on it, I felt very fulfilled. Then I think that sounds pretty good. If you can look forward to something positively, look back on it very positively, and while you're doing it, you're not really worried about what you're doing. I would like that.
But, just to drive the message home, I mean, this gets into the difficulty, right? I mean, I've given that example many times before that, it's indisputable that somebody has a net worth of $1 million, say, and you can prove it anywhere, but success is a little bit harder because there's so much feeling aspect to it, and fulfillment is the same. It's your personal definition. And all you can do is to use those tools that are actually freely available now and just kind of figure out what your truly authentic definition is. And it's definitely a journey, I mean, I'm still refining and polishing my vision board, and it, like Chris said, discovering new things and ideas and making it richer and better.
I think as well, to pick up on something Francis mentioned, to be present is always very important. That's something human beings are very bad at doing. It's something I'm very bad at doing. But I spend a lot of time with my dog, and she's always in the present. If she's doing something, it's 100%. She immediately forgets about what she was doing 5 seconds previously, and she's just in the moment. And that was a great life lesson that I tried to learn from. And I think that generally people will feel fulfillment and be fulfilled if they're in the present of doing something and they're just consumed by that. They're not thinking about what's going to be the outcome of this. They're just literally, this is what I want to do in this moment. And that's something we should all aim to do. And it is very hard because, for a variety of reasons, actually, but it's definitely something it's kind of a goal that we should seek, I believe.
Yeah, no, that's fair point.
Okay, Timothy Bentley in California makes the point that don't the French people tend to work to live rather than live to work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're touting that often, but yeah, I haven't seen that. Whenever I'm in France, I hear that France has the highest number of strikes in the world. I'm often scared to connect through Paris because nothing against the French people, but there's always a national strike going on and a big deal about something, And I think it comes down to, like, when we looked at the data, it seemed like a worldwide phenomenon, and part of it is also capitalism. I think that we hinge on this idea that there needs to be perpetual growth. Perpetual growth is called cancer. It's not sustainable, right? I mean, so I think this is a whole 1 hour talk, I think, just to answer that question. But in my experience, I think it is a worldwide phenomenon. I would support the idea that a good proportion of people, wherever I've been, or irrespective of the field of work people work in, it seems to exist. Francis or Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely would agree there are cultural differences. And as I live in a country that has proximity to France, I know how they are significantly different culturally. And I think what the questioner has said is true, really. I do think it's essentially true. But I also think in a kind of globalized culture, we're all becoming more and more like each other, whether by accident or by design. I think I wouldn't say the cultural differences are being erased, but I think the boundaries are being blurred more and more. So I definitely agree as a British person that the French have a healthier attitude to work. But I do think because of global capitalism, I just think the as I say, the boundaries between these cultural differences are narrowing for sure.
I don't have anything particular to add.
Okay. Michael Brignall puts in a lot of doctors claim that they enjoy their lifestyle, but it's often obvious that they're not being honest with themselves.
He hit the bullseye, I think. Thank you, Michael, for bringing that. And that is so true. A lot of times I think there's many reasons. And if this was a medical forum, I would go into more of the medical data, but a lot of it is sunk cost fallacy, right? If you've invested so much effort into something, then you have to believe that that's the only right solution. And it's the second chapter of our first book. Too many people are too identified or too married to their identity. Oh, I'm the corporate tax lawyer for Bell Corporation, whatever it is, and that's their pigeonholed life's identity. And you cannot defocus, and it's same is true of physicians, and I think this is an international problem. And you're right, a lot of people are not being honest with themselves until they are burning out and crashing, and if you look at the burnout rates and you look at the NHS data, like the UK data, there's threats about massive exodus from the UK. The US is projecting a physician shortage of over 100,000 people in 6 or 10 years. I think that's more than the entire country's workforce for Canada. It's massive shortages, right? I mean, something's not working out, right? I mean, this is a very important piece. And we do feel very strongly and passionately that part of it is understanding, what that authenticity looks like. I mean, we need a healthy workforce to care for our population. If you don't provide, and that's part of the way we are pushing the envelope of physician wellness. It's not so that people all retire and disappear doing something else. We need the workforce, right? I mean, how are you going to provide appropriate and adequate care for all the stuff that needs to happen if people are not engaged and really training to happily do what they are doing? Like, would you see a disengaged and unhappy person replacing a hip, or you'd rather have somebody who wants to replace a hip doing that, right? I mean, the answer is very obvious. I think the wheels are turning, a lot of and it needs to start from education level. I think a lot of universities are now at least listening towards developing some sort of a wellness curriculum and, distilling and taking these ideas further to the table and making it part of the lifestyle, right? I mean, how many times has a physician been told, yeah, that's the lifestyle. You have to work 24/7. Yeah, it's nothing. No. All the research happens on the weekend. It's your problem. It's too common, if I don't know how many of the people online are physicians, but they would have all heard these words. It's I think the first step is recognizing that we have a crisis, and that's when we can start dealing with it. Francis, you want to talk about the American challenge?
I would say it's, from a human perspective, entirely the same.
Yeah.
I think the sunk cost fallacy reference really is a great way to put it. And the one other part would be to say, you spoke about the identity part. If you loosening your grip on that excessive identification with that title, it hurts. There's a sense of, whether you can say more or less, or however you want to put it, it's that everything I did is not everything that's there, and everything I have is not the whole thing. It's to acknowledge that it's the first step to doing something about it, but that part can hurt a lot, and maybe more so than some certain people than others. But yeah, that's what I would add.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't work in healthcare, but I guess I don't know if these two will agree. I'm sure they will be with a similar situation in their countries, but I think access to the profession for people of all backgrounds is really important. Certainly in Britain, your chances of qualifying to be a doctor, you're going to need significant financial support, almost certainly, because it's 7 years and it's just so hard to, if you're from a blue collar or working class background, you can almost rule it out immediately. So that naturally feeds into what I think Francis was talking about, which I think would be very relatable for a lot of people who are doctors and probably accountants and probably lawyers, that people from a certain social background get pushed into it because their families think, oh, this is a great career for some, whereas it's not really people aren't really choosing what to be a doctor. It's almost the chosen few just get pushed in that direction. And one of the big reasons for that, certainly in Britain, is because a certain proportion of the population, and I would say it's a large proportion, cannot qualify, or it's very difficult for them to qualify. So I think, this is I don't know how much it's related to our discussion today. In a sense, this is more of a financial, economic issue for the society. But I do think, broadly speaking, we need to ask questions about things like that, because we need to give people as many opportunities as they can to choose what they want to do, essentially.
Before we continue with Roberta's question, I'm wondering whether you would be comfortable if you stop sharing your screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, thank you. So Roberta has put in, where does fear of missing out fit into all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I can start answering. I think it fits in a big way, right? I mean, most of us believe that if we are doing whatever we're doing, we ultimately there's a cost of lifestyle. There's things you want to achieve, and nobody wants to miss out on something, the beautiful candy, whether it's a vacation or something that you want, a ring that you want to buy, or whatever it is, the fancy car, the boat, the jet. And a lot of it is driven by the fear of missing out, right? We fear that if we didn't have X, Y, and Z, then we're not going to be happy. It's still the if-then hypothesis. It's contrary to the assumption that if I get X, Y, and Z, I'll be happy. And the fear of failure and the fear of missing out probably fuels a lot of our effort and work, and sort of the crazy hamster wheel pursuit, right? We've all been there. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes, and it can be difficult to be aware of this, but the question you need to ask yourself is, what are you actually missing out on by doing what you're doing? You are missing out on things by devoting yourself completely to work, that you'll never get that time. Famously, time is the most valuable commodity because we can't get it back.
Yeah.
And I made the decision in my life recently that I'm never going to say again, I'll do that in the future. I'm just going to do things now. If I want to do something, I'm going to do it. If I want to experience something, I'm going to experience it, unless it's logistically impossible. Because you don't know how many years you've got on this planet. I mean, I'm not old, but I'm not as young as I was. And I don't want to look back and think, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you do this? That should be your fear of missing out. Your fear of missing out should be on the time that you're squandering. I mean, like a famous song about it is Cats in the Cradle, where basically the song is about how someone works all their life and they miss their children growing up, and then they really regret it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a classic thing. It's a great song, I think. And that should be what is defined by the phrase fear of missing out. You should be scared of missing out things that really matter.
I would add, one of my favorite phrases is, we can do anything, but you can't do everything. Meaning, you chose to spend this whatever time is where you are with us, in exchange for, instead of doing something else. And well, I'm sure we all hope that it was valuable for you. But the sense ultimately is, we own our decision as someone who's hopefully growing into more of a mature, developed person, and owning the decisions we make are making, and will continue to make, hopefully, something that is in either something that's a lesson, meaning I did this and realized I never want to do it again, or this is something I like doing and will continue to do it. And ultimately, it's about the doing and actually interacting in reality, whatever it is we want to not miss out on or want to miss out on, and then decide, oh, I don't know why it was such a big deal. I totally hated it, or I really like this. I want to do it again. Ultimately, it's the turning into the real experience versus you can entertain as many things you want to do as you want and watching others do them. But like Christopher just said, we have the time and then we decide what to do in that time frame.
Okay. Michael Brignall asks, when you gave wholesome advice to your children, did it help you to do so to yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, again, a brilliant question. Certainly, I think the principles and practices of coaching, and a lot of it is rah-rah, but I think when we get to the core principles, it definitely helps. You can self-coach, which I do many times. You can talk yourself out of just punching yourself, for something bad that happened or something else. And then for the kids, I think it's even more important. I think a lot of we see, behavioral issues and, some psychologists would even say mental health illnesses and disorders are to do with, bringing up the kids and, intergenerational trauma and childhood experiences and all of that. And, a lot of these good coaching moments can be life-changing, right? I mean, in the moment, you can really leverage on showing them, in a very rational, simplistic way, well, this is how it is for a particular thing. Like a child is not listening, screaming and throwing. Instead of joining the drama, you can kind of introduce self-awareness a little bit, step by step, and kind of work it through that. I think for sure, I think parenting is a big part of being self-aware and vice versa. And I think definitely it helps.
I do not have children, so I cannot answer this question.
Yeah, I also would feel a little uncomfortable answering this question given I don't have children.
Okay, Robert Burton comments, what to do if time demands are from an external source, such as your boss sets unreasonable deadline, the doctor wants to retire, but there's no replacement?
Yeah, I think that's again a wonderful question, and I think you're so right that, it's really too simplistic to assume that we can just do whatever we want and not have a care in the world about our community, society, and whatever is. No, I think it's a balance, right? We're no way saying, we get this question a lot in the medical sessions. Say, well, you just want people to retire and do whatever they want. Well, absolutely not, right? I mean, not everybody can just disappear into the caves or whatever and do whatever they want. It's just not going to support our society. So it becomes tough. I think it's, again, this and happens so much in the medical world. Yeah, I want the paper reviewed by tomorrow morning. Yeah, but it's 6:30. Like, come on. No, but the deadline is tomorrow. It's like, well, could you not tell me last week? No, it has to be done. And sometimes the pressures are there, but I think it is coming down as I see it now. And I've fallen prey to this all the time, even now. I need the response by tomorrow morning, and we do it at 11 p.m. or whatever. I think it comes down to, except if it's urgent or, is going to harm somebody. I think other times it's coming down to developing a culture of really, designing professional boundaries that, it's not going to happen. And that's just making it part of the culture is very important. I know for a fact that those who might be lawyers, a lawyer friend of mine, I mean, he's told me so many times, just like medicine, they're expected almost to either stay up till 2 a.m. and figure out all the cases, or get up at 3:30 or 4 and show up in the office and be prepared for the day. It's just grilled into the culture. So I think, to me, it comes down to really going through a culture shift. not easy in any capacity. I know, at least in the Maritimes, a lot of very senior practitioners are still practicing exactly for that reason. They cannot really leave their 2,000 odd families astray, and just disappear, and despite their struggles and problems, they are still continuing. So I agree. Point well taken. I don't think there's an easy solution, but to me, it's about creating boundaries and starting from the start, right? I mean, you can't fix the problem when you're at the tail end of it.
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo very much what Ketan said. Another field where it really applies is finance. Having worked with people in finance, by the way, I don't know why the camera isn't switching to me. I can't control it. And another field where we have very long hours is finance. I know from having worked with people in finance, it's very well documented anyway. And I think, I mean, Ketan just said the solution is boundaries. I think in a way, the solution is for us to engage in a form of non-compliance with this culture. I know that's easier said than done in some circumstances if there are financial challenges. But if people just continue to go along with it and people just continue to do what then you'll be exploited. You will continue to say, right, we need this tomorrow. Right, we need you to do 100 hours this week. Right, we need you to stay 1 o'clock and then get up for 6 o'clock. And and the thing is, people do because they think, oh, the remuneration is ultimately worth it. So the question we pose is it ultimately worth it?
Yeah.
I would add, every decision and action comes with a result. And if you're ready or not ready, but there's a responsibility to be taken. And as much as we can try as I can try to shift that responsibility to someone else, is ultimately the future me that will have to answer to the decision that I made, whether it's yesterday night or whatever it is, and to, like a better term, deal with it. Because that's the decision and I made that made the results that led from that, and will I take responsibility?
Elka Enola says, based on personal experience, one does not know a priori what one really wants. Only when we're faced with the real choice do we know what we really want, what is at the top of our hierarchy.
I agree. I think that's what.
I think the classic scenario that I would always encounter, I've encountered so many times, is where someone is living their life a certain way and then they get a really serious health condition, like they get cancer, for example. And then and you've heard it, it's such a hackneyed expression, you've heard, oh, it made me completely reassess my life priorities. So that's why, as we've advocated, that self-awareness and self-knowledge is so important, so that you don't go down that route. And in fact, you end up with some, heart condition or hypertension. These two will know the medical terms better than me. But and then you find out, you know what? Not only is this going to seriously affect your life, it's not solvable.
Yeah.
You're not going to get better. So it's really very, it couldn't be more important for you to engage in this journey before you find yourself going down a ravine with no paddle and no way out.
Yeah, great point. I totally agree with Elka.
Another very easy example would be, I went to a restaurant. If I go to a restaurant, I can order a dish that is reliable and I would like, or try a new dish that I'm not sure if I will like more or less. I won't really know until I actually try the dish, which one I like better. And then that will inform my decision in the future. And the experience gives the information for future decisions. I mean,
That's human.
Seems very obvious, but saying that sometimes just may trigger something for someone.
Okay, and Eric Lickness says, great presentation. Christopher, you could have been telling my story at the end there. I can really relate to being discovered as gifted. How did you come to discover Mensa, And have all of you relied on Mensa in your quest for mentorship or peerage? I'm just wanting to say we can't presume that everybody who is here is in Mensa.
Yeah. Well, Mensa is fairly well known in Britain. So that's how I encountered it. I knew about it well before I did this presentation. What's the person's name? Kathleen, what was the person?
Michael. It was Michael.
No, Eric Lickness asked this.
Oh, Eric asked that. Okay.
Eric. Yeah, so all I can say really is that I hope that it wasn't as painful for Eric as it was for me. I mean, quite frankly, I mean, it was my early life, particularly my adolescence, and to a great extent my 20s, was really challenging, really difficult, and quite painful. And, you know, it can be really hard to find yourself, like I said, the pressure, you feel pressure because you know you've got a certain level of ability, but you don't know where to go when, you know, people can't really relate to it. It's really hard. So I'm not like I'm not a Mensa member, so I'm not sure what to say about that part of the observation and question. But I just hope that it wasn't too bad for Eric, and that Eric's on a good path now, because it can be really difficult. I mean, typically, I don't want to describe myself as a prodigy, because I don't think that's true. But when you see these very prodigious young people, often they don't, you know, they don't achieve their potential. And I think a lot of that is because of the life challenges associated with being gifted. One of the worst things about it for me was that I touched on this briefly, but people just think, oh, right, okay, so you just want to do academic work all the time. No, of course I don't. I'm 8 years old. I want to play video games and play football and hang around with my friends. Why would I want to do academic work all the time? So people, you know, treat you differently, but then want you to be the same as everyone else. It's very hard. It's very hard.
Yeah. No, I agree. You know, it was same in school. Yeah, this guy, I mean, the pressure to get a perfect score was so high that I was just fed up of it. And it's just, and most of our education system is asking a fish to climb a tree. So that makes it double hard. You know? It's just like, wow, why? You know, like just because you solved all 40 math questions right doesn't make you Albert Einstein.
Okay. Michael bring up comments. Society's traditional attitude for smart people is to pressure them to be a brain in a cage for society, a mule doing math all day or studying medicine textbooks for decades. I just want to comment first that in my own experience, nobody ever told me that I was gifted. I didn't join Mensa until I was practically 50 years old. Oh. And when I got in, I was just so surprised. You know, the only reason I applied was because I had taken a stats course. Right. And I'd been told that stats is impossible. And I got 96%. I thought, maybe I should just try. And it was like, okay. The envelope came from Mensa. I drove off to a strange place to open it in quiet so I could cry without anybody seeing me. But I said, you're in.
That's amazing.
So anyway, so the question, you know, a mule doing math all day or studying medicine textbooks for decades.
Yeah, I think it comes from really, you know, the societal norms, right? Like everybody likes to fit people in boxes, right? And if you're outlier, then like Chris said, people don't know what to do with that. It's like, yeah, I mean, how many of the musical genius or sports people or academicians or scientists, entrepreneurs, they're often outliers, right? They're thinking differently, you know, like, I know,
there's lots of stories. I mean, there's a story from guy who's very famous in Britain, probably slightly less famous in Canada, the United States, called Noel Gallagher, who wrote all the songs for Oasis, who like one of the most successful bands of the last 30 years.
Yeah.
But he came out of school like he didn't receive any encouragement for music at all. You know, like he talks about his music teacher not giving him any encouragement. And you know, this guy's written songs that sold millions of copies in a day. And that happens all the time because of this box mentality, you know, well, we can't put you in a box, so, you know, we don't know what to do with you. And that happens creative skills, with intellectual skills, and it's definitely a big challenge for people.
Yeah, and it also goes the other way, right? I mean, my friends who've worked in Apple or whatever, like nobody ever wanted to get in an elevator or stuck in an elevator, as they would call it, with Steve Jobs. He would roast people all the time, and it would just be impossible. He'd be just asking them questions, and just like they would avoid it like plague, So they can also respond very weirdly, right? I mean, or what seems weird to other people. So it's a fascinating question, I think.
Roberta wants to have a follow-up. She's the one who asked about the fear of missing out. She wants to know if the fear of missing out is somehow related to wanting to find your tribe. Is there some kind of a connection or a tension there?
I think it's hard to say without more specific context. It could be, but it may not. It may not be. Meaning, where is that FOMO coming from, or what is the underlying fear? And that's not something, at least I'm not always aware of what that is for myself. So in other words, I don't know. It's possible. I think the depth of the context would help.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if it means, like the fear of missing out, like it can fuel finding your tribe, right? Because when you find more people like yourself or in the similar thinking pattern, it just helps you not feel like you're missing out anything at all. Like those, for example, with a spiritual bent, if you go to a Buddhist meditation place or something, you're not going to feel foreign at all, right? I mean, you're going to be right at place and right at heart, and everything is perfect with the nice bells and music and everything else. So I think it's to me, the FOMO piece is a good opportunity to just stop and ask, like, what is it you want? It's like a crossroad. It's like if you think you're missing out on whatever, a Mercedes, for example. Okay, well, what does that mean? Like we use a car example so many times in coaching. It's a depreciating commodity, and about 20 minutes after you bought it, it's lost about 20% value, and you're paying for it for the next 7 years, and it only depreciates in price. So a lot of people wouldn't want to deal with the consequences and all that stuff. So to me, the question probably means that it could be a
I think
find the tribe.
The car example is a great example of the power of the media and advertisers, and how they sell an image of something that is not actually in any way a reflection of the reality. They can't, they're constantly pushing how exciting cars are, how sexy they are, and how much you'll enjoy having one, and then you just sat in a traffic jam. You can't get anywhere. Even certainly in Britain, I mean, it's all like the roads are. It's a joke. There's no way that driving is enjoyable in this country. Like no one enjoys it. All these programs about how fast does this car go? How quickly does it get to 60? And then you can't ever do it. You can't ever do it because you're just in a traffic jam all the time. It's just that boggles my mind actually in a way. But I think that is a classic example of, you have to take a step back and look at what is the reality of owning a Mercedes going to be like? What is it actually going to be like? As opposed to the image that is sold to us of, oh, you will enjoy owning a Mercedes. And I think typically you'll find, I know some people like cars, and I'm not knocking that at all. I'm not diminishing that, but yeah, I can't see how owning an expensive car is particularly enjoyable in Britain, certainly, because it's a small country with loads of people. It's not like Top Gear. If you watch Top Gear, it's a big popular international program. They're driving all over the road like this. It's not like that. It's not like that in this country. So I think that's a classic example of one of the themes we kind of discussed earlier in the talk.
Okay, Lucas Thung is saying, so is Amazon the best place if we want to buy Soar?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fortunately they offer free shipping on Prime memberships or whatever the minimum cutoff is. Yeah, if you're looking for it, for sure, that's probably the easiest and the quickest place.
Can you hold that book up again, Chris, if you still got it in front of you?
So it's it won't come on my camera, will it? I don't know why it's not switching to my camera when I'm speaking, but anyway, it's called Saw: A Soul's Quest. It's got all of our names on it. Shall I mention Lauren, who just got
Yeah, go ahead.
So Lauren Scolino designed the cover. And
if you want to show the backside, Chris, it might help.
And then this is the back as well. So I must say as well, I must mention as well that this is based on something that Ketan painted. The cover is based on something I had it in my mind to have something like this, but he did the painting. I have no art skills whatsoever.
Yeah, the painting is sitting right here. I would have to take it off the wall. It's a good sized painting. So
yeah, it's very, very good. I mean, his house is full of paintings.
And that was a painting. It's sitting in the other corner. You know, that was a one I did like 10 years ago, I think. And I forget, Francis, how we decided to use that, but that's what happened.
And then the other book, I don't know if you can see me unless I speak, but The Legendary Quest is the book with all the meat in it. And then the sword is the example of how to apply the meat. Okay, well, the three of you have been very, very generous with your time and your information today. I think it's been a very rich discussion, covered a lot of points. And thank you very, very much. Just to let you know that on behalf of Toronto Mensa, we will be sending each of you a small gift as a sign of our appreciation.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the discussion, and thanks everybody who's attended it so patiently on a Sunday afternoon for 2 hours. I really appreciate that. That means a lot. And I really appreciate the support. You know, I know how it goes on Sunday afternoons for medical meetings. You guys be lucky to have 4 people. I really appreciate the support.
Yeah, I just echo those comments. We really appreciate everyone coming, and I knew we'd overrun the hour and a half. So we obviously have, but we tried to keep it as close to an hour and a half as possible. And yeah, thanks for all the questions and interest. We really appreciate it.
Okay. So thank you very much. We will end here.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, bye, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye.